Thank you very much, and thank you for accommodating me today. I promise to be at Whittington Park in my constituency at 4 o'clock. It's all possible. It's all worked out and it's all possible. Even the location of my bike at the appropriate bike rack outside Islington Station, so I can do like a Le Mans start type run from the station onto my bike and away. I will remember to unlock the bike before I jump on it. Otherwise it could be painful for all concerned. So I'm really sorry about this, but thank you very much for accommodating me. And I am a great supporter of LRC, have been since its inception, because I think it's absolutely essential that there be a group and a forum within the party that can have open and serious discussions on a whole range of policy issues and give people that space and that opportunity, because Labour Party structures have meant that too often general management committees or general committees don't exist anymore, and in too many constituencies there's hardly any opportunity for political discussion or debate. We are have become totally an electoral machine. Now, don't get me wrong, an electoral machine is a very important thing, because winning an election is an important thing to do. But we excite and enthuse and activate people if A, they feel involved in the party and can make a contribution, and B, their policy-making process involves them so that a resolution passed at a branch meeting can end up on the floor of conference, can end up as party policy, and can change directions of the party. And I've never forgotten the first tribute group meeting I ever went to, years and years ago. Ian Ricardo gave a story about how he spoke at the 1945 pre-election Labour conference, got up and moved a resolution about public ownership of water, gas, electricity. And it was passed. And he made a great speech. I'm sure he did. He always made great speeches. And he's told afterwards by no less a person than Herbert Morrison, great speech, but you've just lost us the next election. We didn't not only not win that election, we did bring all those things into public ownership. That was the power of democracy within the Labour movement and the party. And I think we have to think very well about bringing those things back in. And I want to compliment Sussex LRC on providing that space and that opportunity. And it's a pleasure to be here with Perna, who is a former activist with me in Islington on refugee matters, and I'm still there, she's here, and I've now been promoted to be President of Voluntary Action in Islington, which she used to work for. Don't worry, there's no executive power involved, it's a completely honorary role. I'm only there because the previous president resigned for reasons I can't remember. This has been a strange week, I just want to tell you this. Ian Paisley died last night, as you know, yesterday, and I saw it on Al Jazeera, who gave it a very strange reportage, but I can't imagine most journalists in Al Jazeera would have any great recollection of Ian Paisley. It certainly seemed bizarre, a team of journalists in Doha reporting on the death of Ian Paisley. Anyway, they did it as best they could, and I spent years and years detesting Ian Paisley, his politics and everything he stood for, and then recognised that at a point in his life something changed, and he changed with it. And whilst he did some dreadful things in the 70s and 80s, he did eventually recognise that there was a need for a different approach in Ireland. And he could be quite funny, actually. He once called me a Republican Catholic Papist lackey. And I saw him afterwards. I said, Ian, that's a bit strong, you know, because I'm not a Catholic. Okay, I take out the papist bit, but not the rest. And then on another occasion, there was a really obscure vote. I can't remember what it was. It was very late at night in the House of Commons, really late. I can tell you how obscure it was. It ended up with Dennis Skinner, Tony Benn, me, and Ian Paisley and a few of his mates in the same division lobby, voting for some weird amendment or something. And this is like 1 o'clock in the morning. Tony, bless him, goes up to Paisley and said, a rather unfortunate choice of words, said, Ian, I really admire the way you stick to your guns by voting on what you consider to be a matter of principle. I sort of looked at Tony. If I was you, I'd leave it out. Because as Dennis Skinner says, nobody owns the lobbies. And then Paisley turned around and said, "That just may be, Tony, but you're wrong on the Battle of the Boyne." So Tony, undeterred by this, said, "Well, that's very good, Ian, but where am I wrong on the Battle of the Boyne?" He said, "I'll tell you." And so they went off somewhere to sit down at 1 o'clock in the morning to have a discussion about the Battle of the Boyne. I went home. So I just think we have to recognise that political pressure does change things and does make a difference. Now, I want to talk on international issues, and I won't be too long, so there's time for questions and discussion. Yesterday, the Minister arrived in Parliament and in response to an urgent notice question put in by John Barron, Conservative MP for Billericay, about the issues of bombing of Iraq and Syria and the growth of ISIL forces there. And this goes on the back of a day-long debate on Wednesday on international affairs and the NATO conference the week before. And the whole narrative is that there's a problem arisen, ISIL forces have grown very strong, and they're doing awful, unspeakable things. Yes, yes, and yes. Therefore, we've got to get involved in bombing, and this will sort the problem out. So I have a role sometimes of being unhelpful to government in these matters. So I just asked him a question. I said, a couple of questions. One, why have ISIL become so strong? They didn't grow out of nothing. Are they not a product of the invasion of Afghanistan, the invasion of Iraq, the invasion of Libya? And then my second question is, if you're concerned about the inequality of arms in the region, why is it that ISIL have the most sophisticated American weaponry at their disposal? Where has that come from? Who paid for all that? Answer, we have been exporting billions of pounds worth of military equipment to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain. We have stuffed the whole region full of the most sophisticated weaponry in return for those countries investing in real estate in Britain and buying up various companies and so on. And it's a wholly unpleasant circle that is going on. If you give massive, or provide or sell massive armaments to undemocratic regimes that routinely abuse human rights, that deny women the right to vote, even to drive a car, are you surprised if those weapons end up with an even more extreme form of groups such as ISIL, who are doing appalling and disgusting things? I hold no grief for them whatsoever. But they're not the only people in the region doing public executions and beheadings. That is done routinely in Saudi Arabia and other countries as well. The hypocrisy surrounding this is unbelievable. And there's, in Parliament, there's a sort of, it's almost like Banquo's ghost, is the vote that was taken in 2003 on whether to invade Iraq or not. Everyone remembers where they were, every MP that is, on the day of that vote. Everybody remembers how they voted or didn't vote. And there is a massive guilt complex amongst most Labour MPs that supported that war. Most Tories who supported it have some doubts about it. And those that voted against it wear it as a sort of badge of pride. And they are listened to with more seriousness as a result of it. So John Barron, who is conservative, quite right-wing, military man, but has a realistic view on what could or should be done, and actually opposed that war, and indeed opposed Libya as well as other issues. And he then raised the issue again about a parliamentary vote to approve any new involvement in bombing in that area. And once again, the kind of informal coalition of a number of parties that came together last year to oppose Britain's involvement in the Syrian conflict has come together again to demand, A, there be a proper parliamentary vote on it, and B, a very clear explanation of the government of exactly what they're trying to do within the region, because I can see us just going once again into it, spending billions of pounds and leaving yet more bitterness, hatred and mayhem behind, which will lead to more instability in the future. I think we should be very, very careful of those people that have led us into a series of ghastly conflicts doing exactly the same again. I think it's time that we kind of had a more serious and more nuanced approach to foreign policy. The other thing I wanted to mention, so we've got time for a few points and discussion, is the NATO conference that took place last week, a week before in South Wales. I went to it, I wasn't a member invited to the NATO conference, but I went as an uninvited guest to look over the fence at them and take part in a number of demonstrations and discussions outside, and we had a counter-NATO conference in Cardiff. If only the media would have bothered to come and report that. We had speakers from France, Germany, Italy, Russia, United States, Britain. Very, very well-informed, very serious discussion. Kargalitsky came from Moscow, Joseph Gersten came from New York, and it was actually a very serious discussion about the role of NATO and military alliances. And I just say this about NATO. I know Stan Newens very well. Some of you might know him. He's former MEP and MP, very good internationalist. He was converted to, he's getting on a bit now, he's converted to internationalism in 1948 when he won a ticket to go and a raffle to go and watch a debate in the House of Commons. And he went to the debate, and it was a debate with Ernest Bevin introducing the concept of NATO and being opposed by Labour left-wingers like Connie Zalaakis and a number of others. And I dug out that debate and reread it. The narrative went something like this. We won the Second World War, we need to link up with the United States because the Soviet Union is now the threat, therefore we need a military alliance against the Soviet Union. Zalaakis and others were saying, we won the Second World War because there was an alliance of democracies and the Soviet Union against the fascists. That surely ought to be the building block for the future. NATO was founded, American troops came back, we have the Mutual Defence Agreement 1958, which shares nuclear power and nuclear weapons secrets and so on, and NATO aggregately now spends $1 trillion a year on defence budgets, the total aggregate of all NATO expenditure. At the end of the Cold War, 1991, NATO should have shut up shop and gone home, as did the Warsaw Pact. The Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe should have taken over as the central force of it, and we could have then gone to an era of lower expenditure and a more cooperative Europe, whether they're in the European Union or not, Europe as a whole as a continent. We didn't. NATO got involved, grew, and took upon itself a global role. Went into Afghanistan in 2001, allegedly on logistical support, but in reality NATO was involved, and also went into Yugoslavia sometime around that time as well. 2010, the NATO summit did two things. One was formally declared itself to be a global partnership, not a regional one, and secondly required all member states to spend at least 2% of their GDP on arms expenditure. This NATO conference went a stage further. A further 33 countries were invited to become associates of NATO. NATO takes upon itself the opportunity or its self-ordained right to go in anywhere in the world if the strategic interests of any member state are involved. So put it another way, if France believes its supplies of uranium from Mali are a threat, then NATO has a right to go in to protect France's supply of uranium from that country or any other place in the world. It's a very, very dangerous situation we've come into. Anyone that's reread the history of the First World War and those interlocking military alliances which suddenly spiraled out of control and ended up with a war that killed millions, all the building blocks are there for that to all take place again. So I remain a total skeptic where NATO is concerned, its lack of democracy and its power structures. And indeed, in the late 80s, Tony Benn, myself and others formed something called the Campaign for Non-Alignment. We were a bit too soon, we should have formed it 4 years later. But it was an important initiative in challenging NATO. So, in conclusion, I just say this. Another war in the Middle East is not going to bring any good about. I think there's a growing scepticism amongst the public about the whole thing. 150,000 marched in support of the people of Palestine. in August, and I think public opinion has moved a great deal on this and saying, well, if you want peace in the Middle East, there's got to be justice for the Palestinian people, be they in Gaza, the West Bank, or in the refugee camps. Secondly, NATO, in my view, is, as I've explained, not very safe alliance to be part of. And so I don't think the Labour Party is going to quickly go away from NATO membership, but I think it's up to us to draw attention to these issues. And the last point, and I'll finish on this, is on the question of nuclear weapons. The 1948, well, the 45 to 51 Labour government did amazing things domestically. Don't take anything away from them now. But they did establish NATO, and that they did order the establishment of the preparation of H-bombs and nuclear weapons, secretly, as it turned out. And we had a, I think you were going to get in trouble. There was a flash? It wasn't a flash? Okay, sorry. Just looking after you. Okay, it's all right. Peace is restored. And we have now got the prospect in 2016 of a Labour government, hopefully, taking a vote on replacing the Trident nuclear missile system. Is it conscionable that with austerity, with unemployment, with needs of training, investment in engineering, social needs, and all the other issues, not just in this country, but all around the world, that we're really going to spend £100 billion on the replacement of the Trident nuclear missile system? And so we have to be very stern on that. We got 100 Labour MPs to vote against Trident replacement in 2007. We need a lot more than that next time round to ensure that it is defeated or just simply not put at all to Parliament in any shape or form. And nuclear weapons are not a defence, they're not a protection, they're not security, they're inherently unstable and dangerous. And I just remind you of the figure I gave, $1 trillion spent on arms by NATO countries around the world. We now live with a sixth of the world's population on the brink of starvation, many others living appalling lives. And as a result of all those conflicts in the Middle East that we've been involved in, thousands of refugees are trying to get from Libya to Lampedusa and to Turkey, to Greece, to Italy, and dying in their hundreds in the Mediterranean. They too are victims of war. Let's turn the agenda around. Look at the causes of war. Look at inequality. Look at abuse of human rights. Look at the appalling alliances we've made with some appallingly militaristic and dangerous people and routine abuses of human rights, and have an agenda on foreign policy which is about international solidarity, that is about justice, that is about sharing resources, and not about yet more grabbing of other people's resources and starting yet more wars in which many more of our young people will once again die as a result of it. It's up to us to mount that debate within our party and to mount that debate publicly, work with CND, Stop the War and everybody else to make sure the public debate comes about that. Thank you very much for inviting me.